My name is Lydia Donatus, and I'm 71 years old. Yesterday, my own daughter looked me in the eyes and said, either you pay $1,500 rent or find somewhere else to live. She said it coldly, as if I were a burden she'd been carrying for far too long. As if I were nothing more than dead weight dragging her down. I just smiled. Because she had no idea who her mother really was. Before I tell you what happened when the black limousine arrived the next morning, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that somewhere out there, someone understands what it feels like to be discarded by the person you gave everything to raise. Now let me take you back. Let me tell you how I ended up in my daughter's house in the first place, and how that house became my prison. When my husband Daniel died 3 years ago, I thought I'd be fine. I thought I'd manage on my own in our little apartment. But grief has a way of hollowing you out, of making even the smallest tasks feel insurmountable. The walls closed in. The silence became deafening. And when my daughter Helen called and said, "Mom, why don't you come stay with us for a while? Just until you get back on your feet," I thought it was a lifeline. I thought it was love. I should have known better. The first month was tolerable. Helen was busy with her job, her partner Linus was polite enough, and I kept to myself in the small guest room they'd given me. I cooked occasionally, cleaned when I could, and tried to make myself useful. I didn't want to be a burden. God knows I never wanted to be a burden. But by the second month, I started noticing the changes. The way Helen's smile would tighten when she came home and saw me in the living room. The way Linus would walk past me without so much as a greeting, as if I were a piece of furniture he'd grown tired of seeing. The whispers that started behind closed doors, whispers that I wasn't supposed to hear but that carried through the thin walls like poison seeping through cracks. How much longer is she staying? I don't know, but it's getting ridiculous. She's always just there. Always just there. As if my presence alone was an offense. As if the woman who had raised her, who had sacrificed everything for her, had no right to exist in the same space. The small humiliations began piling up like stones on my chest, each one heavier than the last. There was the night I came down for dinner, expecting to join them as I always had, only to find just 2 plates set at the table. Helen didn't even look up. "We already ate, Mom. There's some leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry." Leftover pasta. Cold. Congealed. That's what I was worth. There was the afternoon Linus knocked on my door and told me I needed to keep my television volume down because they could hear it in their bedroom. I'd had it on level 3. Level 3. I could barely hear it myself. But I turned it down anyway, and then I turned it off completely, and I sat in silence because I didn't want to cause any more trouble. There was the morning Helen told me I needed to start doing my laundry on Wednesdays only, not whenever I needed to, because the washer was for the household schedule. As if I wasn't part of the household. As if I were an outsider who needed to be regulated and controlled. And there were the looks. God, the looks. The way Linus would glance at Helen whenever I spoke, this quick little smirk that said, "Can you believe we have to deal with this?" The way Helen's eyes would go flat and distant when I tried to tell her about my day, about the book I was reading, about anything at all. She'd nod absently, already pulling out her phone, already dismissing me before I'd even finished speaking. I stayed quiet. I observed. I noted every slight, every cruelty, every moment of disrespect. And I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that all of this was temporary, that there was a world beyond this house where I was not invisible, where I was not worthless. But they didn't know that. They couldn't even imagine it. Helen started making comments about money. Little jabs at first, easy to dismiss. It must be nice not having to worry about rent or bills. Some of us actually have to work for a living. Each comment sharper than the last, each one designed to remind me of my dependence, of my supposed uselessness. Linus was worse. He didn't bother with subtlety. I'd hear him in the kitchen late at night, talking to Helen in a voice just loud enough for me to hear through my bedroom wall. "Your mom's been here for months now. When's she planning to contribute? We're not running a charity here." And Helen, my own daughter, the child I'd carried for 9 months and raised for 18 years, would murmur her agreement, would validate his cruelty, and would betray me over and over again. Dead weight. That's what he called me once, thinking I was asleep, thinking I couldn't hear. "We're carrying dead weight, Helen. You need to do something about it." And she did. Yesterday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, watching the birds at the feeder outside the window. It was the one small pleasure I had left in that house, those few minutes of peace before Helen and Linus woke up and filled the space with their resentment. But Helen came down early. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heavy and purposeful, and I knew. I knew this was it. This was the moment she'd been building toward. She didn't say good morning. She didn't pour herself coffee and sat down like a normal person. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and she looked at me with such cold contempt that for a moment, I didn't recognize her. This wasn't my daughter. This was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Mom, we need to talk." Those 4 words. We need to talk. The beginning of every ending. I set down my coffee cup carefully, deliberately. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing my hands shake. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" She flinched at sweetheart. Good. Let her feel uncomfortable. Let her feel some small fraction of what she was about to put me through. "This isn't working anymore," she said, and her voice was flat, rehearsed. She'd practiced this. Probably with Linus. Probably multiple times. "You've been here for almost a year now, and it was only supposed to be temporary. Linus and I need our space back. We need our privacy." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I've been looking into senior living facilities." "That's not good enough," she interrupted, and now there was heat in her voice, anger that had been simmering for months. "You can't just keep living off us while you figure things out. We have bills to pay. We have our own lives to live. We can't keep supporting you." Supporting me. As if the occasional meal and a room I barely used was some enormous financial burden. As if I'd asked for anything beyond basic human decency. "What are you suggesting?" I asked quietly. She took a breath, and I saw Linus appear behind her in the hallway. He was smirking. Actually smirking, like this was entertainment for him. Like watching a woman being told by her own daughter that she wasn't wanted was somehow amusing. "Either you start paying rent," Helen said, and her voice got louder, more confident with Linus there to back her up, $1,500 a month, "or you need to find somewhere else to live. We're not running a charity here." Linus's words. Coming out of my daughter's mouth. $1,500. For a guest room and the privilege of being treated like garbage. For the honor of being made to feel invisible in my own child's home. I could have told her right then. I could have revealed everything, could have watched that smug expression crumble off her face. But I didn't. I just smiled. A small, knowing smile that seemed to unsettle her more than tears would have. "Is that really what you want?" I asked softly. "Yes," she said, but her voice wavered just a little. Some part of her, some small part, must have known she was crossing a line she could never uncross. "Either pay rent or get out. Those are your options." Linus stepped forward, putting his hand on Helen's shoulder in this possessive, territorial way. "We've been more than patient, Lydia. But enough is enough. We need an answer by the end of the week." I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who had inserted himself into my daughter's life and poisoned her against me. This man who had whispered in her ear night after night until she saw her own mother as nothing more than an inconvenience to be disposed of. "You'll have your answer," I said calmly. "Sooner than you think." I stood up, left my coffee on the table, and walked past them both. Helen called after me, "Mom, don't be dramatic," but I kept walking. Up the stairs, into my room, and I closed the door quietly behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in months, I laughed. Really laughed. Because they had no idea. They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. You see, there's something Helen never knew about her father. About me. About the life we lived before she was born and the choices we made to give her what we thought was a normal childhood. My late husband Daniel wasn't always the quiet accountant Helen remembered. And I wasn't always the simple housewife who volunteered at the library and baked cookies for school fundraisers. Before Daniel died, he made me promise something. He took my hand in the hospital, in those final days when the cancer had taken everything but his voice, and he said, "Lydia, don't tell her yet. Don't tell Helen about your mother's estate until she's ready. Until she understands what it means to be humble, to work for what you have, to value people over possessions." I'd promised him. I'd kept that promise for 3 years, even as I'd struggled alone in our apartment, even as I'd accepted Helen's grudging invitation to move in, even as I'd endured months of disrespect and cruelty. But yesterday, sitting on that bed, listening to my daughter and her partner celebrate their successful eviction of dead weight, I decided Daniel would understand. Some people never learn humility through patience and example. Some people need to learn it through shock and consequence. I took out my phone, not the cheap one Helen thought was all I could afford, but my real phone, the one I kept hidden in my nightstand, and I made a call. "Hello, this is Lydia Donatus." "Yes, it's been a while. I need you to send a car tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. No, not the sedan. Send the limousine. The black one. Yes, that one. And make sure everything else is ready. It's time." The voice on the other end was warm, professional, respectful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. "Of course, Mrs. Donatus. We'll be there at 9 sharp. Will there be anything else you need?" "Just the car," I said. "And patience. This is going to be quite a morning." I hung up and looked around the small guest room that had been my prison. The bare walls. The single window. The narrow bed that Helen had once apologized for. "It's not much, but it's just temporary, Mom," before she'd stopped apologizing at all. "Tomorrow morning, I'll leave this room." But I wouldn't leave quietly. I wouldn't slink away like the burden they'd made me feel like. I'd leave in style. And I'd leave them with questions they'd spend a very long time trying to answer. That night, Helen and Linus went out to dinner. They didn't invite me. They rarely did anymore. I heard them laughing as they left, heard Helen say something about finally setting boundaries, and I smiled to myself as I heated up soup in the microwave. Boundaries. Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea what boundaries you're about to run up against. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep much. I was too excited, if I'm being honest. Too eager for the morning to come. Too ready to see the look on Helen's face when she realized that the mother she'd dismissed and degraded wasn't quite as helpless as she'd assumed. At 8:30, I got up and got dressed. Not in the comfortable but worn clothes I'd been living in for months. No, I put on one of the outfits I'd kept hidden in the back of the closet. A tailored navy dress. Pearl earrings. Low heels. I did my hair carefully, my makeup precisely. When I looked in the mirror, I saw myself again. Not the diminished, invisible woman I'd become in this house, but Lydia Donatus. Lydia Castellano Donatus. Daughter of Esther Castellano. Inheritor of the Castellano fortune. At 8:45, I carried my one suitcase downstairs. I'd already shipped everything else I cared about to storage weeks ago, anticipating this moment. Planning for it. Helen was in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, coffee in hand. She looked up when she saw me, and her eyes widened at my appearance. "Mom? Where are you going? You look different?" I supplied. "Yes, I imagine I do." She set down her coffee cup, and I saw the first flicker of unease cross her face. "What's going on? Are you leaving? You gave me an ultimatum, Helen. Pay $1,500 a month or find somewhere else to live." "I'm choosing somewhere else." She blinked, and for just a moment, I saw guilt flash across her features. "Mom, wait. I didn't mean. I mean, we can talk about this. Maybe we were too harsh yesterday." Too harsh. That's what she called it. Too harsh. "No," I said calmly. "You meant every word. And that's fine. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Linus came down the stairs then, pulling on a t-shirt. "What's all the—" He stopped when he saw me. Saw the suitcase. Saw the way I was dressed. "You're actually leaving?" "I am." He exchanged a glance with Helen, and I saw something pass between them. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction that they'd finally gotten what they wanted. "Well," he said, trying and failing to hide a smile, "I guess that's that then. Need help carrying your bag to your car?" "I don't have a car here," I said. "But thank you for the offer." Helen's brow furrowed. "Then how are you?" The doorbell rang. It was exactly 9 o'clock. Punctual as always. "That would be my ride," I said, and I walked to the door. I opened it to find Edward standing on the porch, dressed in his formal uniform, cap in hand. He was 70 himself, but he stood straight and dignified, every inch the professional chauffeur he'd been for my mother for 40 years before coming to work for me. "Good morning, Mrs. Donatus," he said, his voice warm and respectful. "The car is ready." "Thank you, Edwards. It's good to see you again." "The pleasure is entirely mine, ma'am." Behind me, I heard Helen's sharp intake of breath. I turned to see her standing in the hallway, her face pale, her coffee cup forgotten in her hand. Linus had come to stand beside her, and his smirk had vanished. They were both staring past me at Edwards, at his uniform, at the formal way he addressed me. "Mrs. Donatus?" Helen repeated faintly. I smiled. "That is my name, Helen. It always has been. But I thought, you always went by Mom or Lydia, or—" "In this house, yes. Because I was trying to be someone simple. Someone humble. Someone who didn't make you feel inferior. Clearly, I succeeded too well." Edwards picked up my suitcase, and I followed him out the door. That's when Helen saw it. The limousine parked at the curb, long and black and gleaming in the morning sun. Neighbors were already peeking through their curtains, already whispering, already wondering what was happening at the Morrison house. "Mom." Helen rushed out onto the porch, her bathrobe flapping around her legs. "Mom, wait. What is this? Whose car is that?" I paused at the edge of the driveway. I could have just gotten in. I could have left without explaining anything, let her wonder and worry. But I wanted her to know. I needed her to understand exactly what she'd thrown away. "It's mine, Helen." "Well, technically it belonged to your grandmother." "My mother." Esther Castellano. The name didn't register at first. I saw her processing it, turning it over in her mind, trying to place why it sounded familiar. Linus got there first. I saw the exact moment recognition hit him, saw his eyes go wide and his mouth fall open. "Castellano? As in Castellano Industries?" The Castellano Foundation? Now Helen was looking at him, confused, panicked. What? What are you talking about? Your mother, Linus said, his voice barely above a whisper, is Esther Castellano's daughter? The Esther Castellano? Edwards had opened the back door of the limousine. I stood next to it, waiting, watching my daughter's face as the pieces started falling into place. I don't understand, Helen said, and her voice was shaking now. Grandma Esther she was just a sweet old lady who visited sometimes. She lived in a regular house. She didn't. She lived in a 16-room estate in Connecticut, I corrected gently. When she visited us, she dressed down and drove a rental car because your father and I had agreed to raise you normally. We didn't want you to grow up entitled. We didn't want you to think money made you better than anyone else. We wanted you to understand the value of hard work, of humility, of treating everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. But Helen was walking toward me now, her face stricken. But you lived in that little apartment. You worked at the library. You drove an old car. I chose to live that way, I said. After your father died, I could have moved into any of the properties your grandmother left me. I could have lived in luxury. But I was still grieving, still trying to honor your father's wishes, still hoping that the daughter we'd raised would show the compassion and character we'd tried to instill in her. Linus was frozen on the porch, his face ashen. He'd Googled it, I realized. On his phone. He was reading about Esther Castellano's empire right now. The manufacturing company she'd built from nothing. The real estate holdings. The foundation that had donated hundreds of millions to education and healthcare. The estimated net worth that had been in the billions when she'd died and left it all to her only daughter. To me. Mom, Helen whispered, and tears were streaming down her face now. Mom, I didn't know. I didn't realize. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. If you'd known I had money, would you have treated me with more respect? More kindness? Because if the answer is yes, Helen, then we have an even bigger problem than I thought. She was crying openly now, her hands covering her mouth. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was awful to you. I was cruel. I thought. You thought I was a burden, I finished for her. You thought I was weak and helpless and worthless. You thought I had nothing to offer you except inconvenience. And so you treated me accordingly. Please, she begged, coming closer. Please don't leave like this. Let me fix it. Let me make it right. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who was my daughter but who had somehow become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look at her own mother and see nothing but dead weight. The attorneys are waiting, Mrs. Donatus, Edwards said gently. For the reading of the additional documents. Additional documents? Linus found his voice finally. What additional documents? I ignored him and focused on Helen. Your grandmother's estate attorneys have been managing her affairs since she died 5 years ago. There's a foundation to run. Properties to maintain. Investments to oversee. I'd been letting them handle it because I was still in mourning, still trying to figure out who I was without your father. But yesterday, when you gave me that ultimatum, I realized something. I realized that Daniel was wrong. Not about raising you humbly, that was good and right. But about waiting for you to be ready to understand your heritage. Some people don't grow into understanding. Some people need to be shown. Mom, please. I'm going to the estate now, I continued. Your grandmother's estate in Connecticut. The house where I grew up. The house that will soon bear a historic marker because of your grandmother's contributions to society. The attorneys have some papers for me to sign, and then I'll be moving into the East Wing apartment. It has a beautiful view of the gardens. Much better than that guest room you grudgingly gave me. I'll come with you, Helen said desperately. Let me come with you. Let me apologize properly. Let me. No, I said firmly. Not today. Not like this. You're in your bathrobe, Helen. You're unprepared for what that world looks like. You have no idea how to conduct yourself in that environment, and I won't have you embarrassing yourself or me. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the shame she'd made me feel. But I'm your daughter, she whispered. Yes, I agreed. You are. And that's the only reason I'm not cutting you out of my life entirely. But being my daughter doesn't mean you automatically inherit your grandmother's legacy. That has to be earned. And right now, Helen, you haven't earned anything except my disappointment. I climbed into the back of the limousine. The interior was cool and comfortable, leather seats and polished wood, a far cry from the cramped guest room I'd been living in. Edwards closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's seat. Through the tinted window, I watched Helen collapse to her knees on the driveway, sobbing. Linus stood on the porch looking shell-shocked, his phone still in his hand, probably reading about exactly how much money his partner's mother controlled. As Edwards pulled away from the curb, I allowed myself a small smile. Not of triumph, this didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. Like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd allowed to be buried under months of disrespect and degradation. The drive to Connecticut took 2 hours. I spent them looking out the window at the changing landscape, at the small towns and rolling hills, and I thought about my mother. Esther Castellano had been a force of nature. She'd built an empire from a single factory, had fought her way through a male-dominated industry, and had given away more money than most people earned in 10 lifetimes. But she'd also been kind. Generous. She'd treated everyone from the CEO to the janitor with the same respect and dignity. Your real wealth, she'd told me once, isn't in your bank account. It's in how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. That's when you find out who you really are. I'd tried to teach Helen that lesson. I'd really tried. But somewhere along the way, something had gone wrong. Maybe I'd sheltered her too much. Maybe the contrast between her comfortable life and the reality of my ordinary existence had made her view me as less than. Maybe Linus had poisoned her against me. Or maybe, and this was the thought that hurt most, maybe she'd always been this way and I'd just refused to see it. We arrived at the estate at 11:15. The iron gate swung open automatically, and Edwards drove up the long, tree-lined drive. I hadn't been here in almost 2 years, not since shortly after Daniel died. I'd been too grief-stricken to deal with it, too overwhelmed by the responsibility of managing my mother's legacy on top of my own mourning. But now, seeing the house again, the sprawling brick mansion with its ivy-covered walls and manicured gardens, I felt something settle in my chest. This was my inheritance. This was the world I came from. And I'd denied it for so long, trying to be small and humble and inoffensive, that I'd forgotten I had the right to take up space. I had the right to be seen and heard and respected. The staff was waiting at the entrance. Mrs. Charlotte, the head housekeeper who'd known me since I was a child. Roberto, the groundskeeper. Jennifer, my mother's former personal assistant who now managed the estate and the foundation. They all smiled when they saw me, genuine warmth in their eyes. "Welcome home, Miss Lydia," Mrs. Charlotte said, using the name she'd called me for 50 years. "It's good to be back," I said, and I meant it. The attorneys were in the library, 3 of them in expensive suits with briefcases full of documents. They stood when I entered, shook my hand, and expressed their condolences again for my husband's passing even though it had been 3 years. These were the people who'd been managing the estate in my absence, and they'd done it well. We spent 2 hours going over documents. Papers to sign, decisions to make, updates on the foundation's work and the various properties and investments. I'd been receiving regular reports, but I'd never fully engaged with the scope of what I'd inherited until now. It was staggering. Not just the money, though there was more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, but the responsibility. The foundation alone employed 50 people and had dozens of active programs. The real estate portfolio included commercial properties, residential buildings, and the estate itself. The investments were diverse and carefully managed. "Your mother built something remarkable," one of the attorneys said. "And you have a real opportunity here to continue her legacy and make it your own." My own. That phrase stuck with me. For so long, I'd been trying to be what other people needed me to be. Daniel's wife. Helen's mother. The nice lady who volunteered at the library. But who was I? Who was Lydia Donatus when she wasn't shrinking herself to fit into other people's limited expectations? I was about to find out. After the meeting, Jennifer gave me a tour of the East Wing apartment that had been prepared for me. It wasn't just a room, it was a full suite with a bedroom, sitting room, private office, and balcony overlooking the rose gardens. The furniture was a mix of my mother's antiques and new pieces chosen to my taste, which Jennifer remembered from years of knowing me. "We've also prepared options for you if you'd prefer the main house," Jennifer said. "But we thought you might want somewhere private while you readjust." "This is perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Thank you for taking care of everything." She smiled. "Your mother would be so happy to see you home. She always hoped you'd come back someday." That evening, I stood on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'd texted Helen that I'd arrived safely. She'd responded immediately with a flood of messages, apologies, explanations, desperate pleas for forgiveness. I'd read them all, then put my phone away without responding further. She needed to sit with her guilt for a while. She needed to understand that respect and love couldn't be bought or demanded, they had to be earned. 3 days passed before Helen showed up at the estate. The gates were locked, the security informed, and when she buzzed the intercom, I was the one who answered. "Mom? Mom, please let me in. I need to talk to you." I looked at the security monitor, saw her standing at the gate in wrinkled clothes, her face blotchy from crying. Linus's expensive car was behind her. He'd driven her here, I realized. Probably curious to see the estate. Probably hoping to salvage whatever he could from this disaster. "Come up to the house," I told her. "Alone. Linus can wait in the car." I watched on the cameras as she argued with him, as he tried to insist on coming with her, as she finally gave in and made him stay. The gates opened, and she drove up the long drive, and I saw her face when the house came into view. The shock. The disbelief. The dawning realization of exactly how much she'd misjudged her own mother. I met her at the front door myself. She got out of the car slowly, looking up at the mansion with wide eyes, taking in the gardens and the fountain and the sheer scale of the place. "Mom," she whispered when she saw me. This is unbelievable." "Come inside," I said. "We'll talk in the library." She followed me through the marble foyer, past the grand staircase, through hallways lined with art that she'd never known her grandmother collected. I saw her trying to process it all, trying to reconcile this reality with the narrative she'd constructed about her poor, helpless mother who needed to pay rent or get out. In the library, I gestured to one of the leather chairs. She sat, and I took the chair across from her. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I let the silence stretch between us. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice breaking. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was horrible to you. I treated you like you were nothing, and I was wrong. I was so wrong." "Yes," I agreed calmly. "You were." She flinched. "I don't know what happened to me. I don't know why I became so cruel. Linus and we were stressed about money, and I just started resenting having another person to take care of, and I stopped seeing you as my mother. I stopped seeing you as a person at all. You saw me as a burden, I said. You saw me as dead weight. She covered her face with her hands. I know. I know I did. And I hate myself for it. Every moment of every day since you left, I've been replaying all the terrible things I said and did, and I'm so ashamed I can barely breathe. Good, I said quietly. You should be ashamed. Because what you did, Helen, wasn't just disrespectful. It was cruel. It was a betrayal of everything your father and I tried to teach you. We raised you to be kind, to be compassionate, to value people for who they are, not what they can give you. And you turned into someone who demands rent from her own grieving mother. I know, she sobbed. I know, and I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please let me make this right. I leaned forward. Helen, do you know why you're here right now? Why you're apologizing? She looked up, confused. Because I was awful to you. No, I interrupted. You're here because you found out I have money. If I'd left that house and moved into a studio apartment somewhere, would you be here? Would you be sorry? Or would you just be relieved that you finally got rid of your burden? Her face went white. That's not. I would have. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. You had 11 months to treat me with basic human decency. 11 months to show me compassion while I was grieving your father. 11 months to remember that I'm your mother, that I sacrificed everything to raise you, that I deserve respect. But you didn't give me any of that. Not until you found out I controlled a fortune. I'm not here because of the money, she insisted, but her voice was weak. Aren't you? Then why is Linus waiting in the car? Why did he insist on coming with you today? She couldn't answer that. We both knew why. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens. Your grandmother built this empire from nothing. She started with one factory and turned it into an international company. She employed thousands of people. She donated hundreds of millions to charity. And you know what she told me when I was about your age? She said that money doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. If you're generous, money lets you be more generous. If you're cruel, money lets you be more cruel. If you're kind, money gives you more opportunities to be kind. I turned back to face her. You're my daughter, Helen. And because of that, you're entitled to a share of your grandmother's legacy. But entitled doesn't mean you've earned it. And right now, I don't think you've earned anything. What do you mean? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. I mean that I'm putting your inheritance in a trust. You'll have access to it eventually, but not yet. Not until you prove to me that you understand what it means to have this kind of wealth. Not until you prove that you can treat people with respect regardless of what they can do for you. How? She whispered. How do I prove that? The foundation is always looking for volunteers, I said. Real volunteers, not socialites who want their pictures in the paper. People who are willing to work in homeless shelters, food banks, after-school programs. People who are willing to see other human beings as valuable, even when they have nothing to offer in return. She nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, I'll do it. I'll volunteer. I'll do whatever you want. I don't want you to do it for me, I said sharply. I want you to do it because it's right. Because you genuinely want to help people. If you're just going through the motions to get your inheritance, I'll know. And it will be worse than if you'd done nothing at all. I understand, she said quietly. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. Helen, you're 32 years old. You're old enough to have developed character and compassion. The fact that you haven't, the fact that you could treat your own mother the way you did, tells me that your father and I failed you somewhere along the way. Maybe we sheltered you too much. Maybe we gave you too much without making you work for it. Maybe we should have told you about your grandmother's wealth so you'd understand the responsibility that comes with it. I don't know. But what I do know is that I can't let you inherit a fortune until I'm confident you won't use it to hurt people. She was crying again, but these tears seemed different. Less panicked, more genuine. I want to be better, she said. I want to be the person you and Dad tried to raise me to be. I don't know how I lost my way so badly. You lost your way, I said, sitting back down across from her, because you stopped seeing people as people. You started seeing them as obstacles or inconveniences or burdens. And once you start down that path, Helen, it's very easy to justify cruelty. It's very easy to tell yourself that you're just setting boundaries or protecting yourself or doing what you need to do. But what you're really doing is protecting your comfort at the expense of someone else's dignity. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What about Linus? What about him? He was the one who kept saying we needed to charge you rent. He was the one who called you dead weight. I should have stood up to him. I should have defended you. But I didn't, and that's on me. But he influenced me. He made it easier to see you the way he saw you. I leaned back in my chair, studying my daughter's face. Helen, Linus didn't make you do anything. He revealed what was already inside you. A strong person, a person with real character, would have told him to stop. Would have defended her mother. Would have ended the relationship before letting it poison her into becoming cruel. You didn't do any of that. You let him validate the worst parts of yourself, and you participated willingly. I know, she whispered. You're right. I know you're right. Is he still waiting in the car? She nodded. Then I think you need to decide something. You need to decide whether you want to be the kind of person who stays with someone who helped you mistreat your own mother. Because I'm telling you right now, Helen, as long as you're with Linus, I don't want him in my life. He will never be welcome in this house. He will never have access to any part of your grandmother's legacy. And if you choose him over making amends with me, I'll accept that. But you need to understand the consequences. Her face crumpled. You're asking me to choose between you and him? No, I corrected. I'm telling you that choices have consequences. You chose to treat me terribly. You chose to let Linus influence you. You chose to give me an ultimatum instead of treating me with love and respect. And now you're living with the consequences of those choices. If you want to rebuild our relationship, if you want to prove you've changed, then you need to make different choices going forward. She sat there for a long moment, her hands twisted in her lap, her face a mask of anguish. I didn't soften. I didn't reassure her. This was her moment to decide who she wanted to be. Finally, she stood up. I need to go talk to Linus. All right. She walked to the door, then turned back. Mom? I really am sorry. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to become the person you and Dad wanted me to be. Even if it takes years. Even if you never fully forgive me. I'm going to do it. We'll see, I said. I watched from the library window as she walked back to the car. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see the body language. Linus gestured angrily at the house, probably demanding to know what I'd said, probably furious that he wasn't invited in. Helen shook her head, her shoulders squared. The conversation got more heated. And then, finally, Helen walked around to the driver's side, getting in, and starting the car. Linus scrambled out, shouting something, but she pulled away. Left him standing there in the circular drive of my mother's estate, abandoned and furious. I called security. There's a man at the front drive. Please escort him off the property and make sure he doesn't return. Yes, Mrs. Donatus. I watched as the security vehicle pulled up, as Linus argued with them, as they firmly but professionally guided him to the gates and sent him on his way. And then the estate was quiet again, peaceful, and I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. Helen called me that evening. I left him, she said without preamble. I broke up with Linus. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, and tomorrow I'm going to start looking for my own apartment. A small one. Nothing fancy. I need to learn to live on what I earn, not what I think I'm entitled to. That's a good first step, I said carefully. I also called the foundation. I asked about volunteer opportunities. They said I could start next week at the homeless shelter downtown. 3 nights a week, serving meals and helping with intake. I closed my eyes, feeling a tiny spark of hope. That's good, Helen. I know I can't fix this overnight, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. I know it's going to take a long time to earn back your trust. But I'm going to do it, Mom. I'm going to show you that I can be better. That I am better than what I became. I hope so, I said softly. I really do. We talked for a few more minutes, awkward and painful, both of us dancing around the huge wound that had opened up between us. When we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my sitting room and let myself cry. Not from sadness, exactly, but from exhaustion. From the weight of everything that had happened. From the grief of realizing that the daughter I'd raised had become someone I didn't recognize, and the uncertainty of whether she could find her way back. The next few weeks were strange. I threw myself into the foundation's work, attending meetings, reviewing grant applications, visiting the programs my mother had funded. It felt good to be useful again, to be using my mind and my resources to help people who genuinely needed it. The staff was welcoming, respectful, and it was such a stark contrast to how I'd been treated in Helen's house that sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for someone to tell me I was in the way. But it never happened. Because these people valued me for what I brought to the table, my perspective, my mother's vision, my genuine desire to make a difference. Helen kept her word about volunteering. I didn't check up on her directly, but Jennifer mentioned that she'd been showing up consistently at the shelter, that the staff there said she was quiet but hardworking, that she seemed genuinely engaged with the people she was helping. She asked about you, Jennifer said carefully one afternoon over tea. She wanted to know what programs you were most interested in, what causes mattered most to you. I got the sense she was trying to understand you better. To see you as more than just Mom. That would be a nice change, I said. She also asked if there was a way she could contribute financially to the foundation. She said she didn't have much, but she wanted to start the habit of giving. That surprised me. Helen had never been particularly charitable before. What did you tell her? I told her we'd be happy to accept any donation, no matter the size. She set up a monthly recurring gift. It's not a large amount, but it's consistent. And it's coming out of her own paychecks, not from any family money. I nodded slowly. It was a small thing, but it was something. A sign that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand. 2 months after I'd moved to the estate, Helen asked if she could visit again. Not to see the house, she clarified, but to see me. To have dinner together, if I was willing. I was willing. Cautiously, guardedly, but willing. She arrived on time, driving a modest car I didn't recognize, her own, I realized, not Linus's expensive vehicle. She was dressed simply, her hair pulled back, no designer labels or flashy jewelry. She looked tired, but there was something different in her eyes. Something clearer. We had dinner in the small dining room, just the two of us. Mrs. Charlotte had prepared a simple meal, roasted chicken, vegetables, and fresh bread. Nothing ostentatious. I'd specifically requested that. For a while, we ate in silence. Then Helen spoke. I've been thinking a lot about Grandma Esther, she said. I barely remember her, really. She died when I was what, 13? And even before that, she only visited a few times a year. She was busy, I said. Running the company, managing the foundation. She wanted to see you more, but she respected your father's and my decision to raise you away from all of this. Tell me about her, Helen said. Really, tell me. What was she like? So I did. I told her about my mother's fierce intelligence, her work ethic, her refusal to accept the limitations people tried to place on her as a woman in a male-dominated industry. I told her about the nights my mother would come home exhausted from fighting battles at work, but she'd still sit with me and help with my homework, still ask about my day, still make me feel like I was the most important thing in her world. She used to say that success without compassion was just greed with better PR, I said. She believed that the more you had, the more responsibility you had to help others. She lived that belief every single day. Helen listened, really listened, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. I wish I'd known her better. I wish I'd understood what she represented. You can still honor her, I said. By becoming the kind of person she was. By using whatever resources you have, time, money, energy, privilege, to make the world a little bit better. Is that what you're doing? Is that why you're so involved with the foundation? Partly, I admitted. But also because it gives me purpose. After your father died, I felt so lost. And then living in your house, being treated like I was worthless. I started to believe it. I started to think maybe I didn't have anything valuable to offer anymore. But being here, doing this work, it's reminded me that I do have value. That I can still make a difference. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. Hers was trembling. Mom, I'm so sorry I made you feel worthless. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I took out my stress and frustration on the one person who'd always been there for me. I squeezed her hand. I know you are. And I'm starting to believe that you're genuinely trying to change. I am, she said fiercely. I'm working with a therapist. I'm volunteering. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not just reacting to stress or letting other people define me. It's hard, and I mess up constantly, but I'm trying. That's all I can ask, I said. We finished dinner and moved to the sitting room for coffee. Helen looked around at the comfortable furniture, the books lining the shelves, the family photos I'd finally unpacked and displayed. This feels like you, she said. Like the real you. Not the version of you that was trying to fit into my guest room and not take up too much space. I was trying to be small, I acknowledged. I was trying not to be a burden. But in doing that, I lost myself. I let myself be diminished. And I should have spoken up sooner. I should have told you how your treatment was affecting me instead of just enduring it. No, Helen said firmly. No, Mom. You shouldn't have had to tell me not to treat you terribly. That should have been obvious. That's on me, not you. Don't take responsibility for my failures. It was the right thing to say, and I could tell she meant it. Before she left that evening, she hugged me tightly. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for not giving up on me. You're my daughter, I said simply. I'll always hope for the best for you. But Helen, understand this, I'm not going back to being small. I'm not going back to hiding who I am or pretending I don't have resources or influence. This is who I am. This is the life I came from and the legacy I'm choosing to embrace. If you want to be part of my life, you need to accept all of it. I do, she said. I accept it. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of Grandma Esther. And I'm going to work every day to become someone you can be proud of too. Over the following months, Helen did exactly that. She continued volunteering, not just at the homeless shelter but at other foundation programs too. She went back to school part-time, taking classes in nonprofit management because she said she wanted to understand the work better. She built a life for herself that wasn't dependent on anyone else's money or approval. And slowly, carefully, we rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't the same as it had been before. There was a wound there that had scarred over but would always be sensitive. There were moments when I'd remember how she'd looked at me when she told me to pay rent or get out, and I'd feel the anger and pain rise up all over again. But there were also moments when I'd see her serving meals at the shelter, really connecting with the people there, treating them with genuine dignity and respect, and I'd feel hope. 6 months after I'd left her house in that black limousine, Helen came to me with a proposal. "The foundation has been talking about expanding the housing program," she said. We were in my office at the estate, where I'd taken to spending my weekday mornings. "There's a real need for transitional housing for women leaving abusive situations. I've been researching it, and I think I could help develop the program. Not as a volunteer, but as actual staff. I know I don't have a lot of experience, but I've been learning, and I care about this work. I really care about it." I studied her face. She looked nervous but determined. This wasn't about accessing family money. This was about finding her purpose, about contributing something meaningful. "You'd have to go through the normal hiring process," I said. "I won't give you special treatment. If the hiring committee thinks you're the right person for the role, then fine. But if not, you'll need to accept that." "I understand," she said. "I wouldn't want it any other way." She got the job. Not because she was my daughter, but because she'd genuinely impressed the hiring committee with her research, her passion, and her understanding of the population the program would serve. I abstained from the vote to avoid any conflict of interest, but Jennifer told me later that it had been unanimous. Watching Helen throw herself into that work, seeing her grow into a confident, compassionate professional, was one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. She made mistakes, of course. She was learning. But she learned from them, and she never lost sight of why she was doing it. A year after I'd moved to the estate, Helen and I had dinner together on the anniversary of the day she'd given me that ultimatum. We didn't talk about it directly, but it hung in the air between us, this ghost of what had been. "I think about that day all the time," she finally said as we were having dessert. "I think about how close I came to losing you forever. How I could have become someone so hard and cruel that there was no coming back from it." "But you didn't," I said. "You chose differently. You did the work to change." "I'm still doing the work," she corrected. "Every day. I think I'll be doing it for the rest of my life. Because that person I became, that version of me who could look at her own mother and see nothing but a burden, that person is still in here somewhere. And I have to stay vigilant, stay aware, make sure I never become her again." "That's wisdom," I said. "Real wisdom. Understanding that character isn't something you achieve once and then forget about. It's something you practice every day, in every interaction." She smiled, and it was genuine, no longer the tight, resentful expression I'd seen so often in that last year of living with her. "Grandma Esther would have liked you standing up for yourself the way you did. The way you refused to just accept being treated badly. I think she would have been furious that it took me so long," I said with a laugh. "She never would have tolerated that kind of disrespect. She would have called you out immediately." "I wish she had," Helen said quietly. "I wish someone had called me out sooner. But I'm glad you finally did. I'm glad you didn't just disappear and let me go on thinking I was justified in how I treated you." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone I was starting to recognize again. Not the child she'd been, not the cruel stranger she'd become, but someone new. Someone who was figuring out how to be both strong and kind, both successful and compassionate. "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm proud of the work you're doing, the person you're becoming." She started to cry, these quiet tears that she didn't try to hide. "That means everything to me. Everything." "I know," I said. And that's how I know you've really changed. Because if you were still the person who gave me that ultimatum, my approval wouldn't matter. My pride wouldn't matter. All that would matter is what you could get from me. But you're not that person anymore. I'm never going to be that person again, she said fiercely. I promise you that. Now, as I stand here telling you this story, it's been 2 years since that morning when the black limousine pulled up to my daughter's house. 2 years since I reclaimed my identity, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. I'm 71 years old, and I'm running a foundation that touches thousands of lives. I'm living in a beautiful apartment in my mother's estate, surrounded by memories of her strength and vision. I'm working every day to honor her legacy and to build something meaningful with the resources she left me. And I have a relationship with my daughter again. Not the relationship we had before, that's gone forever, burned up in the flames of her cruelty and my pain. But a new relationship, one built on mutual respect, on honesty, on the understanding that love without respect is just obligation and resentment wearing a family name. Helen is building her own legacy now. She's using her grandmother's wealth responsibly, carefully, always asking herself whether what she's doing honors the values Esther Castellano stood for. She's in therapy. She's volunteering. She's working at the foundation and genuinely making a difference. She's dating again, but this time she's chosen someone who encourages her compassion instead of feeding her worst impulses. She'll inherit her share of the estate someday. Not because she's entitled to it, but because she's earned it. Because she's proven that she understands what wealth really means, not luxury or status or power over others, but responsibility. The responsibility to use what you have to make the world better, to lift people up instead of pushing them down, to see every person as valuable regardless of what they can do for you. But here's what I want you to understand, whoever you are watching this, wherever you are in the world, this story isn't really about money. It's not about estates or limousines or hidden fortunes. Those are just the details, the set dressing. This story is about dignity. It's about refusing to be diminished. It's about understanding your worth even when the people closest to you treat you as worthless. How many of you are living small right now? How many of you are letting people treat you badly because you're afraid of conflict, afraid of being alone, afraid of taking up too much space? How many of you have convinced yourselves that you deserve the disrespect, that you're the problem, that you should just be grateful for whatever scraps of kindness people throw your way? I'm here to tell you, stop it. Stop shrinking yourself. Stop accepting cruelty disguised as honesty or boundaries or practicality. Stop believing that you're a burden when you're actually a gift. You don't need a hidden fortune to reclaim your dignity. You don't need a black limousine to make a dramatic exit. What you need is the willingness to say, I deserve better than this, and then to act accordingly. Maybe that means leaving a toxic relationship. Maybe that means standing up to family members who treat you badly. Maybe that means walking away from a situation that's slowly killing your spirit, even if you don't know exactly where you're going next. Whatever it is, do it. Because life is too short and you are too valuable to spend your days being made to feel small by people who should know better. And if you're on the other side of this equation, if you're the one who's been treating someone badly, taking them for granted, seeing them as an inconvenience instead of a person, stop it. Stop it right now, before you push them so far away that they never come back. Before you wake up one morning and realize that the person you've been treating like garbage is actually the person who loved you most in this world, and now they're gone. Apologize. Mean it. Do the work to change. It's not easy, and it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Because otherwise, you'll end up like my daughter was, full of regret, scrambling to fix something you didn't even realize you were breaking until it was almost too late. My name is Lydia Donatus. I'm 71 years old. I'm the daughter of Esther Castellano, and I'm the inheritor of her empire. But more than that, I'm a woman who learned that hiding who you are doesn't make you humble, it just makes you invisible. And I'm done being invisible. I'm done being small. And I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you'll decide to be done with it too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And please, in the comments, tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone who made you feel worthless? Have you ever had to reclaim your dignity after someone tried to take it from you? I want to hear your stories. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all need to know. That we're not alone. That somewhere out there, someone else has fought this same battle and survived. That it's possible to come through the fire and find yourself on the other side, stronger and clearer and more certain of your worth than you ever were before. My daughter gave me an ultimatum that day. She thought she was telling me to pay rent or get out. But what she was really doing was giving me permission to stop hiding, stop shrinking, stop pretending to be less than I was. And the black limousine that arrived the next morning? That wasn't just a car. It was freedom. It was dignity. It was the beginning of my journey back to myself. So here's my question for you. What would your black limousine look like? What would it take for you to reclaim your life, your dignity, your sense of self? You don't need a fortune. You just need courage. And the belief that you deserve better. Because you do. Trust me. You really, really do.